everybody. Welcome to the training, learning, and development community. Thanks for joining us today. Got a great guest. We have Bruce Chen from KochaSoft in, is it Ontario? You're in Ontario, Canada, right?
Yes, I am in Ontario. So you wouldn't know unless you were here, but Toronto, for those who commonly follow world geography.
Right, which is not really me. But yeah, thanks for joining us today. I'm excited to talk to you about your role as a CEO of an LMS division, and just sort of your passion for L&D and how you got to where you are now. So let's just get into it. I've got a few questions that are set up, and just so that folks know, Bruce had reached out to me to talk in TLD cast, just to sort of discuss his background, his interest in L&D, and he does have a really, really interesting background. In fact, one of the things I want to bring up is that you have your own podcast that you host, right?
That's correct. It's called the Makeshift CMO. Bit of a different vibe from this, but in case you are screamingly bored, search it up on Amazon, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. But that's a totally different thing.
Right. So you were a marketer. Now you're an L&D professional, CEO of the LMS division of KochaSoft. Tell us more about that. Like, how did you even start your journey in learning and development?
Yeah, that's a great question. How I started, knowing nothing. Basically, I took a role at my previous company. We were doing HR tech. I think the thing that burned inside of my belly, so to speak, that got me to that point was this idea that when I was younger, I didn't understand what on earth I wanted to do with my life at all. And so I wanted to join an HR tech company that helped people get to a better career. Ultimately, at this company, we were designing an internal talent marketplace. So we were helping people who were in one role also try out different roles in order for them to best develop and discover their passions. Which led me to KochaSoft in the sense that I started heading up all their marketing, a little bit of their business development. And it just so happened that they were developing a cloud-based LMS. And they were like, hey, you kind of seem like the right person to lead some of these projects. One thing led to another, and now I'm here.
All right, cool. So you were a marketer. What was it? I think the company was it Paddle?
Yes,
and
that's correct.
And it was basically an HR product, right?
You got it, exactly.
Right, okay. And so it was kind of talent development, yeah?
It was internal mobility, which was more, I don't know if many of our audience have here, it's either internal mobility or talent mobility. But it's this idea that, let's say I work at a large company like Microsoft, and I start off as a salesperson. I could get into theoretically another role, like on the cloud team or whatever. In practice, the practice of internal mobility does cause some political friction in large orgs because people want to keep their best people right where they are. But that was where I sort of really learned about the HR world in general. It's that like this is a practice that isn't widely accepted, as are a lot of them in learning and development. Yet there are so many that if they were implemented, things would function so much better at organizations. So that's sort of what that experience taught me.
And so you were basically kind of working with HR professionals with this particular product. Was there anything about the HR function that you learned that was particularly interesting as a marketer? Was there anything that you took away from that was particularly compelling and maybe even led you to the L&D side of things?
Yeah, I think one thing that as a marketer that I started self-identifying with HR and L&D people is, our software, at both companies, I've been able to talk to a lot of them because there's a lot of issues, and there's a lot of issues that need to get solved. And whether you're in talent, whether you're in learning, whether you're an HRBP, you have a very unique business problem that you want to solve. But it's one that usually those problems are ones that it's tricky to prove the ROI of these of the solution of these problems like very quickly. Like like for marketing, if I want to spend $10,000 on paid ads, I almost have to prove that, well, they're going to generate $100,000 in revenue, which is possible but difficult. It's also very difficult to say, hey, if you invest $1 million into the upskilling and development of company X, that they're going to get $10 million worth of, their stock price going up. That's a very hard distinction to draw. So that's like one cynical common thing between marketing and L&D that I have found, and that's how I self-identified with those folks. So the self-identifying and common thread is that it's a difficult job, man. It's a very difficult job,
Yeah.
and I think it's a lot of smart people with great hearts. Like you don't get into a role where you're like, my job is to help people learn and develop without inherently kind of caring about other people. And I found that was the soft thread that bound me to the L&D prospects that I would be lucky enough to chat with.
That's interesting. So you did kind of have to market to HR people, market to L&D people. So you have this really interesting perspective. Now you're actually in the L&D space, running a company that as a CEO. But do you think you have a unique perspective coming as a marketer to HR and L&D that gives you something a little different as a CEO for KochaSoft?
I sure hope it is. I sure hope it does. I think, um, yeah, that's a very interesting question. Basic answer: I sure hope it does, because where I started was a place of understanding nothing and just wanting to learn how this world worked.
Yeah.
Um, and I was lucky enough to be recruited to KochaSoft, a company where the company does many things, but the very first meaningful commercial project we had, however many years ago, was in the corporate training space, and right now it was related to cloud, SAP, and IT upskilling. But it's just very funny that I went from one, sort of talent mobility HR company to going to one where the company started to try and train people how to use Microsoft Azure or SAP HANA,
Right.
all these technical things. So it's really just funny how it turns out that way.
I guess maybe that self-identifying aspect of, like what you were just talking about, that's probably the most powerful thing. Having come with like sort of having a diverse background and then entering this space, like, it does seem like it's probably pretty unique for you to be able to look at it from that perspective, just from the outside anyway. Different from somebody that started out in training and then came up and is running a company. You get to see it from outside of it first. So I do think that's very cool. Do you still consider yourself a marketer at all?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, um, put it this way: anybody who's done any type of stint in a marketing agency or has been a marketer at a startup, um, I could be 10 years down the road, and you know any type of entrepreneur or somebody doing things. And I hope people would not be surprised when they say, well, I got my start as a marketer. That was the first job I had in the tech world, because that's the way I think about things and operate, which is how I relate it to the learning and development market, and how I try and work with L&D professionals. It seems like they're totally different things, but they're not. At least in my mind, I'm biased, but how you think about marketing is always like, who's your audience? What are you trying to say to them? What is the medium? And if the L&D function of every large company not thought this way, but had a little sprinkling of that in there, I think things would. I think a learning uptake would be a lot better at certain companies, and I feel like if I could hazard a guess, for a lot of the people on this crowdcast, if that thought process came from the top down for a lot of companies that had an L&D department, your jobs would probably be a lot easier, and you'd be swimming like every single day, being like, "Whoa, L&D is an easy job." Although I've already said before, like, I think it's a very challenging job, and whoever is sort of passionate enough to tackle that issue, that comes from no place but a desire to help other people.
Right. We actually, I guess it was a couple years now, we did a series on marketing and L&D, on sort of the similarities and what you can take away from marketing to help you with your L&D initiatives and all of that. And when I have a second, I'll try to pull that. It's a playlist. I'll pull that playlist up and I'll post it in chat so that people can check it out. But yeah, it's I totally get it. But how about you now as the CEO of KochaSoft's LMS division? What does your marketing background bring to that role, especially since it's an L&D role? Anything specific that you can point out?
For sure. I would say the easiest way to connect those dots is the skill of like early pain point and problem identification. So as CEO of a company that creates learning products, whether it's software or whether it's the actual content, I always think about it, or my team always thinks about it in the sense of like, well, what is this trying to solve? Okay, so we're creating a training program about the cloud for this big company, or this client. What are we trying to solve? Why are we even in the room with these people? Why are they willing to spend the money to work with a motley crew like us to train their people? If they are, if I'm speaking to an L&D professional, what initiative came down to them? What initiative came down to them that made them say, like, listen, so Bruce and team, we're thinking of creating a program that does this, yeah, that's how we do it. It's almost like a SWOT needs like analysis.
Yeah, like Kim was saying, like a needs analysis. Yeah,
it's a top down thing. That's a very roundabout way of saying that it starts top down. We don't just build stuff and say like, I hope people read this or I hope people engage in this. That has proven to not work for many decades. So
right. So do you have any specifics that you can talk about with marketing and L&D overlapping? Is there anything that that you've seen that is especially acute, maybe that you can bring up? And just so everyone knows, I posted the playlist link in the chat if anybody wants to check that out. That's actually a really good series to look. And I could probably add this one to that playlist when we're done.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll speak from a product marketing perspective.
Nice.
Now, all the rage in marketing a while back was using push and notifications and things of that nature to re-engage people, whether that's leads or whether that's subscribers. You're starting to see a lot of those features being built within learning platforms. So whether it's us or competitors, because all the theme and rage in learning in 2020, and I know I'm preaching to the choir, is gamification. Gone are the days where like you'd be at HQ and people would say, "Hey guys, here's compliance training. We're going to stuff you in a room with 300 other people. Here's a printed out, handbook, and here's some stale sandwiches to make it through the seminar." That doesn't work for obvious reasons. And now there's all kinds of things. All LMS have things like quizzing, like announcement boards, like the ability to share courses and learnings and certifications through intranets. These are new things to the world of, relatively new to the world of learning, but these are sort of marketing and growth principles that have been applied in the early days of Silicon Valley for a while now. So I find it very, very interesting to see that level of crossover and the same disciplines used by completely different people.
Right. Yeah, actually this last Friday we had Jonathan Rock on, one of our members, in a showcase, and he kind of showed off a compliance thing he was building, but it was like a zombie game.
That's awesome.
Yeah, but it was a compliance thing that he was building, and it was really, really cool. And he did mention some really interesting things about it, about how he does have some managers that are opposed to it because they almost they sort of feel like compliance shouldn't be that fun, but it's the people that are participating in it are learning. So there's that. It's really it was very, very cool. How about personalization?
For sure. I think personalization is something that has been it's a buzzword, but it's something that has become so incredibly and sorry, that's a great question, because that's another example that I basically neglected to answer in my last question. Personalization has been a thing that has become super prevalent in marketing from the early 2000s, and now for learning, it is becoming all the rage. If you have 10,000 employees that you are supposed to teach, there are maybe 1,000 different ways to segment them. I could give specific examples of how we do it, but it is pretty technical. But basically the way we do it, because our niche is in IT, is we're segmenting people by like SAP Basis, SAP Security. We're segmenting people by like which cloud they want to learn, whether it's Azure, GCP. So we have found, that is incredibly important. And really, personalization, I think, is not only the key to creating a better learner experience, it is the key to something I alluded to earlier, which is prove the worth of L&D, because more personalized content means people are going to be much more engaged with the content. And again, this is something that's been like a thing in marketing for however long, and now it's like something that people never even thought of for learning, and it's all the rage. That's all it takes. Without it, you can't create the most amazing content, and without it, you cannot really get people engaged and really prove like, why is this learning initiative so important, because we're hitting the right people who are going to be engaged with the content.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's so interesting. Kim is saying one of the examples of crossover I always think of is drip campaigns, and she's hoping to include one in a
Yeah,
curriculum with the
yeah.
design for client now. Yeah, and which for marketers that has just been around forever. So it must be kind of nice for you because as a marketer, you're like, oh yeah, well, there's this thing that marketers do, and you sort of can sneak it into as an L&D sort of product or whatever because you just have had experience with it for a while now, but maybe not so much in the L&D space, or it hasn't existed in the L&D space as much, like the personalization piece and those types of things. So is that stuff that you regularly like, hey, we do this on the marketing side, how come we don't do this over on the L&D side? Do you ever I mean, is that something that comes up on a regular basis for you?
It is something that realistically we've asked, but something that it's a general reminder that we should ask this more and more. Like some of our projects, I'm learning on the business side depend on people's engagement. Like we literally get paid more the more people are engaged in like some of the IT training programs. We get paid more if people are more engaged with the LMS. So for me, that's the challenge is and drip campaigns are a great example, Kim, dripping out regular cadences. It's like, if person opens this email, then you send them this content. If person clicks on said button, then you send them some other piece of content. And if they haven't, and there's even the vaunted like breakup sequence where if they don't respond for like 4 emails, what do you do? Um, so that's a really great example, um, and I think it's something that constantly needs to get pushed.
Right.
Yeah.
Nice. So we talked a little bit last time we had a conversation. You talked a little bit about the future of L&D and especially how you're pretty bullish about um, the future of virtual learning. Do you want to talk about that a little bit? What do you see, especially as somebody that is has worked with a lot of marketing technology and some of these systems? Like what do you see the future of L&D to be like?
Well, I think the first thing I will say, and it wouldn't be a 30-minute conversation about anything if we haven't talked about the pandemic that I don't know if anyone's heard, but it happened in 2020, seeped into 2021. However, people feel about that, it's tough to say things haven't changed. Now, that being said, um, my personal belief in a bullish view is that the pandemic will push L&D to be more of a strategic function in the HR and even beyond that world. Because if you think about it, like, um, and this is my view of it from like a 360 perspective. Everyone says that, but if you think about the world's companies that are growing the absolute fastest, and I'm biased by saying tech companies, but that's true. If you were to look at the S&P 500, like what companies are literally growing the fastest, tech companies. Well, a lot of them have been virtual and sort of like location agnostic, and let people do what they want in terms of where they are, how they learn, how they communicate for a while, before there was any mention of coronavirus or vaccines or whatever. So it's something that's going to everybody's talking about how it's going to put virtual working to the forefront, but by extension, it's going to put virtual learning to the forefront. My favorite case studies are of companies like Zoom, Asana, Fivetran, Intercom. All of these companies have been focused on virtual learning or virtual communication, and by extension, learning for a very, very long time. And I'm not saying that's the reason why, their stock will, or, the big objectives of the company will be achieved, so quickly, quarter over quarter. I'm just one guy that thinks that they're not unrelated.
Nice. It's and I was just thinking about this before the pandemic. I remember reading an article, I think it was from Josh Burson from Burson
Yeah,
and
yeah,
Associates, who was talking about, the training function. L&D should be the center strategically of the organization, and everything should sort of branch off from there. And I wish I could give specifics on what the context of that and what's surrounding it is, but everything that I remember reading about that article, I'm like, that all makes sense. Yeah,
yeah.
L&D should be like at the center, because that's the learning function, and everything is moving so fast. If that is strategically where you start, your organization can't help but grow, because it's almost like, kind of like a tree, and you're just, the knowledge is going to expand out, and you're going to continue, your organization is going to continue to kind of feed off that centerpiece and grow larger and larger and larger. Yeah, I just think that's interesting, and that, as a marketer, because I do think that you are definitely functioning as a marketer within, like, as an L&D CEO. I think that is like a really, really key thing, and pretty pretty heavy stuff. It's definitely got a lot of power to that, I would say.
Yeah, one more example that I really love is, and speaking of the future, is I get Instagram ads right now as a tech professional for Shopify saying, like, hey, come to Shopify University. We'll teach you, for 3,500, hours, or whatever the case may be. And that just proves the a large leading innovating company's commitment to learning, that they're just saying, like, we're going to skip university. All right, we're just going to skip this whole thing where people come in with an arts degree and then have to figure out what they want to do with us. I want to just train with us for however many years. They'll be homegrown, and we'll pay them. We know companies like Facebook and Google would think of doing it if it wasn't for, they've probably thought of it, but, anti-competition and things of that nature. But that's a great example of, like, how companies are thinking of learning in the future.
And the pandemic has probably pushed that even further into play. Simply just because we've had to function within these sort of isolated environments, and really, start using our screens more, the online resources more, to be able to learn. And I know for myself, I work for a learning technology company, and I know that we are doing incredibly well, and it's because we publish books on programming, on all kind, cloud stuff, like getting through certifications, all of that, and it's just super high demand. So I do think that Burson is onto something with learning being at the central of an organization. Okay, last question, then we're gonna wrap it up. What kinds of things are you and KochaSoft doing to accommodate, like, your vision as the CEO of this LMS division? What are some things that you're doing right now that you can share with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So our bread and butter has always been cloud and IT training. So that is the niche that we have always served, helping large companies demystify the cloud and upskill in, SAP and non-SAP systems. But beyond that, as we created the learning management tool, the intent was always to expand our capability of helping large orgs solve the problem of not having enough IT skills. And one of the things I wanted to mention earlier, one of the big problems, is you can't just recruit your way to having to solving the IT skills gap. The numbers don't bear out. It's physically not possible. There is literally not enough IT skill out there to serve all the large companies at the rate that they are growing. So training in IT and these, like, sort of STEM skills is the only way to really do it. And if you're a large company, you should probably take that into your own hands. One thing we're up to is we're announcing a partnership very soon with one, hopefully two, content providers. So again, you can probably guess who they are, but you can. Uh, those are platforms where consumers go on and learn content, but we are partnering with them to integrate with our LMS so that we can bring the engaging sort of content that all of these like really large content providers have provided to consumers, but in the form of a nicely wrapped LMS to be sort of an all-in-one shop for large companies to upskill and get more comfortable in their IT systems, which are ever advancing and won't stop advancing.
Are you finding are you challenged at all finding content?
Not anymore. Hopefully, with these partnerships, we've always had a great staff when it comes to creating SAP and cloud content, which is again our niche. That's how the company started. I'm still fortunately lucky to work with individuals whose background are in IT and in training, and I've been lucky to have them still believe in this vision and remain on with my company. So the short answer is probably not, but yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, there is just, I know just personally, there is just such a huge demand for content out there. So, and I know, gosh, like even on the L&D side, on a regular basis in our private Slack group, constantly like seeing, job posts on there, people looking for help for their teams. It's, I think that it's a busy time for L&D and it sounds like it's good for KochaSoft right now.
I sure hope so. we can only hope.
Yeah. Bruce, thank you so much for spending some time talking to the community today. I really appreciate you coming in. Why don't you put your do you have you want to share your LinkedIn profile or anything?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me hop on.
Here, actually, I have it right in front of me. Let me drop that in there. Yeah, and then maybe you could drop the KochaSoft link in there if anybody's interested in checking KochaSoft out. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and close out this episode. Bruce, thanks again. I really appreciate you spending time with us.
The pleasure and appreciation comes all the way from not sunny Ontario, not sunny Toronto. For those who may be on the East Coast or Midwest of the U.S., maybe may understand that. But thank you so much, everyone. Yeah. I really had a blast being on the show. And Luis, thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, everyone. We'll see you. I think on Thursday, we've got Rubina Halwani talking about onboarding and inclusion. That one is a really, that would be a good one to sit in on. Definitely try to tune into that one if you can on Thursday. And with that, we'll see everybody next time. Take care, Bruce. Thanks again.